If you haven't noticed, we're seeing a watershed moment in the gaming industry today. We're seeing an actual industry developer making the right choices, seeing the problems with their current market value and trying to change it for survivability. And this is something we haven't seen in the gaming industry for so long because many developers never want to change or admit defeat. And we've been seeing this with so much developers these past few years. We saw it with Sony and Concord, where they made a $500 million failure in Concord and would never admit their mistake. We see this with Ubisoft and Assassin's Creed, where they're still blaming the gamers even after they sold all their IP and saying, hey, we did nothing wrong. It's just the gamers' fault and the haters. We see this all throughout the gaming industry, where no one wants to take fault for their actions and want to blame someone else for it. And this is the thing that we're not seeing with Square Enix right now, where they're cleaning house. They're removing everyone that was pivotal to the failures that they released these subsequent years. They're not making any bones about it. They're looking at the targeted people that were contributing to the failure, whether it's marketing, promotion, the president, anyone's heads on the chopping block, and they're making the surgical choices that are necessary for a successful developer. I know it sounds absurd to say this, that, hey, a corporate company is trying to make profits, but that hasn't been the case for the gaming industry these past few years. They weren't trying to make profits. They were trying to make statements, and that is exactly what we saw with Square Enix these past few years. It became a developer about statements, and that's what we saw with subsequent sequels to Final Fantasy, where we had LGBTQ relationships at the forefront. It's happened with the censorship in details for a lot of games that came out, where they're covering up certain characters, they're changing parts of the story, they're making contributing factors to have more inclusivity, they diversified the crowds of people in games. They did all these things to appeal to the modern Western political environment. They even instituted programs within the company to actually support these ideas. And this is the thing we've been seeing all throughout the gaming industry, at developers conferences, at consultancy firms, within the game developers themselves, where they're trying to insert politics at every level of the gaming structure. And this promoted people that were in positions of power that never needed to be in positions of power, that didn't care about gaming, that were more focused on representation rather than actually making fun, good games. And this bared fruit in the content that came out from Square, where games that were once profitable were now losing them money on sales. And this is the consistent thing we've been seeing with Square Enix these past few years, where they were producing many failures. And I think that's the thing we saw with Final Fantasy VII, the remake part 2, where it had a financial loss. Ultimately, it didn't produce the amount of sales that they wanted, and it kind of didn't produce a winning formula that was effective for Square Enix, where they're now looking back at everything they did so far and they're not seeing actual results. And this is the kind of thing we've been seeing all throughout the gaming industry, where there has been a lack of results for the content that has been more geared to be political oriented. And I think that is the effects of the current gaming market, where politics are at the forefront, where you're supposed to do certain things to get the appeasement of the gaming journalist class, the consultancy firms, and of course everyone outside of the media entertainment sphere. You get the accolades and reputation if you follow these trends, yet you're not getting the product of success that is actually vital for the sustainment of a business and corporation. And I think that is the thing we've been seeing all throughout the gaming industry, these incorporation of ideals that are more focused on being about the aesthetics, being about the policies and philosophies you want gamers to learn. And I think that's the thing we've been seeing all across the gaming industry, whether it comes to looks and character styles, policies, ideas about patriarchy, ideas about male-centeredness within gaming, the ideals of historical fallacies being at the forefront of gaming and being something that is inauthentic to the gaming experience. And I think that is the thing we've been seeing all across the gaming world, where things are being done not for the pleasure of the gamers. They're being done for the pleasure of people that are in power in the gaming industry, that want to see things reflected in that industry that are not essential to the actual success of that industry. And I think Square Enix is now seeing the fruits of that, where they have to close down studios that they invested millions, hundreds of millions of dollars in, like Luminous Productions and its production of Forspoken that came out as an abject failure for Square Enix, where they had to close down the whole studio. We saw their quarterly earnings drop consistently year after year, where they weren't just making any more profits on these outer production studios in the West. And this is the same thing we've been seeing all across the sales figures for Final Fantasy that has been coming out these past few years, where they weren't making the money that they needed, and they went in a direction that was more oriented to the Western mindset producing content that is more action-packed and more oriented to the Western influences, and it just really wasn't the thing gamers wanted from a Final Fantasy game. You saw that subsequently with the success of Claire Obscure that came out with the traditional base fighting that gamers love, and it actually was a massive success. And I think this is Square Enix realizing, oh, all the things that we took for consideration as a gear towards success have been absolutely false. And we have the evidence to back it. All the money that we're losing from these investments is just not in our favor. And we saw this change in Square Enix when aggressive investment came in and management saying, hey, you got to change everything or we're going to pull our investment. That's the thing that we saw happening with Square Enix, where now they're laser focused on targeting the people that are messing up their business. And this is the thing that we've been seeing these past few days, where the layoffs are just stacking about, where we have all the people that were contributing to the failure of Square Enix ousted from their position, just losing their jobs. And I think that's what we see with people dealing with the localization of the game itself, where they're misinterpreting the overall conversations people are having. They're changing the stories to be more adaptable to the Western audience. We see this with marketing managers that are usually promoting the content in a way that is in line with what we saw with Bud Light and Cracker Barrel, where they're trying to reach a modern audience and neglecting the actual engaged gaming audience that wants to play video games and not just have this virtual signaling effect. Not to mention they're going after game directors as well. The overall director of Square Enix is being kicked out of the organization. You can see with their Facebook profile where everything is deleted now. This is just reflective of what we've been seeing in the gaming industry that has to be done in order for it to be saved, where these people that are not meant to be there, that are giving terrible advice, that are leading these industry developers into historic downslide, need to be eliminated. And they're closing whole divisions. The Women in Games division is just being closed wholeheartedly. They're having massive layoffs in Europe, Canada, the United States, targeting the branches that were improperly suggesting ideas that were in effect actually producing success for the company. And I think this is the thing we've been seeing for a long time. These organizations that have instilled these censorship campaigns within the game itself, where they have to restrict their own localized ideas to be in favor of the Western political mindset. And I think that's the thing that has been aggravating gamers for a long time, because we've been seeing a lot of games that we love kind of be stripped away of actual importance of what we wanted to see from that game. And of course, this is happening with the replacement of the president of Square Enix as well, which is something that's being contributed from the investment group that has taken over, where they're just pushing out everyone that had a contributing factor to the failure of Square Enix. This is the opposite of what we've been seeing in the West, where studios are just closing down, selling themselves to someone else to actually handle the production of the game, or just abjectly failing to understand or changing course on what they should do to produce great content. And I think this is the thing that we have now as a problem in Western studios, where they refuse to change. They may hide and obfuscate what they're doing, but they're doing the same thing because they're dead set on the ideology that they want to enforce onto the gaming audience. And I think this is the actual difference for what we're seeing from Square Enix. They're seeing the problem, say, hey, you're the problem. You're giving us these ideas that you want to insert into these games, and we're not going to take those ideas anymore. And I think that is the thing that we're seeing change within Square right now, where they're noticing the problem and they're actually taking action to change that situation and galvanize and produce content that is in favor of the gaming audience. And I think that is the thing we haven't really seen from Western game developers so far. We saw them just hide what they're doing right now. We see Naughty Dog hiding what they're doing. They're blurring shirts and doing all this other stuff, but they're not really doing the needed thing that they need to do. Fire the people that are producing the problems within your organization. That is not happening. They're keeping everyone, they're just going to hide the truth. They're just going to change how they market things. They're going to keep all the marketing managers. They don't want to change anything at all. And I think that is the watershed moment that we're seeing with Square Enix, where they're noticing the problem and they're saying, hey, we're going to change everything. This is not working. We're firing people in the West that don't know what they're doing. And we're talking about how we have problem with Western studios. And I think that is the key thing that a lot of people have to have a conversation about, specifically Western studios. They have to have conversations about how there's problems at Western studios in order to start the change that is needed to begin the production of great quality content that gamers can absolutely enjoy. But that is just my 2 cents on the situation. Maybe you disagree with me. Tell me what you think. Like, comment, share, subscribe. This is Wagner Knows Why. Catch you next time.